The distribution of income is an area where there's a lot of emotion involved. And in economics, we try to cut through that emotion with data to see what's really going on. And this is a place where I want you to think back on that first article I had you read, Welcome and Beware, Economics is Rude, Crude, and Offensive. Well, this is probably one of those, well, not probably, this is one of those places. Um, an area I cover here in the lectures, because our textbook author, for some reason, doesn't really cover it. He talks about it a little bit, but he doesn't really, he ignores, he only kind of goes halfway. Now, an area we hear a lot about is the pay gap between men and women. And there is. Men make more than women. If you take the average salary of men and compare it against the average salary of women, there's a pay gap. Now, when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were both, is pointed out that they paid the women on their staffs less than the men, they were very quick to point out that there are some other variables that need to be accounted for. And that's what we do in economics. And if you've had statistics, you know you've got to account for other variables. There are more explanatory variables than just one. So, like when we're looking at the differences in wages or trying to explain wages, you can't just look at just one variable because it's not gonna give you the right or an accurate depiction of what's going on. With wages in general, you've got to look at experience, you've got to look at education, you've got to look at the field you're in, and flexibility, and there's a lot of other things involved, and you can't just look at gender. Gender would be one of several variables. And Clinton and Obama were very quick to point this out. That, hey, you can't look at just the averages. You've got to look at everything else that explain wages. So that's what this talks about right here. And Claudia Golden, Harvard labor economist, specializes in labor economics. Now, the thing is, when you control for all the relevant variables, again, field, experience, education, the gender pay gap pretty much disappears, but it doesn't quite all the way disappear. There's a little bit there. And Golden says that last little bit is not discrimination. Some say, well, it's discrimination. That last little, 2 or 3%, 2 or 3 percentage points. She says the evidence is that it is a preference for flexibility, flexible working arrangements that women have more so than men. And if you want flexible work arrangements, you're going to have to pay for it. That will reduce your salary if you want a little flexibility. Anyway, that's what she says. Now, and this is a really interesting interview if you're interested in this stuff. It's a Freakonomics interview, and I highly recommend it. Here's an article speaking of statistics and all the variables that have to be accounted for when you do any kind of study. It talks about all the variables that you've got to ignore to come to this conclusion. So that's an interesting article. Going here on inequality, there's a lot in this chapter, and it's really hard to get at it all. I know that. My goodness, I used to teach a course in economics of poverty and inequality, and it kind of went by the wayside. The materials weren't being renewed, and it's too bad. I mean, we used to have a whole course in this. But anyway, be that as it may, this is the latest study. The Economist magazine talked about this. The latest studies indicate that inequality is not as bad as we used to think, and might be moving the right direction here. And are the poor another myth? The poor getting poorer? We always hear that. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. No. The poor are better off. Now they're not getting better off as fast as the rich are, okay, but they're moving that direction. They're not getting poorer. We hear that all the time. Short video here talks about that. And here is if there's any one thing that could really change your life, okay, this is it. This is it right here. This is personal finance skills. Okay, it makes an amazing difference years down the road. And so I would really encourage you to take 11 minutes and watch this. And now these are other articles that I used to have in here. I've just got too many, and you can see here. Well, I guess I'll mention it's not even visible to you, but I forgot to put it in the correct mode. But during World War II, my dad was a pilot, and he wherever he was training, and my mom, she was a very highly skilled legal secretary. They call them paralegals now, and she never had a hard time getting a job. She was in high demand. But she learned that she had to keep it a secret that her husband was a pilot, or at least she tried her best, And back then, they could ask questions that they can't ask now, They could ask that stuff. Oh, what does your husband do? What does he do? And she found if they found out he was a pilot, forget it, because they knew that they would get her hired. And sure enough, he'd be moved on to the next phase of his pilot training. He flew B-17s and B-29s. And so, anyway, maybe I'll put it in there now that, yeah, I guess I'll stick it in there. I decided it was too long, but again, you see some of my other stuff. Well, that's about it for this module, and we'll see you next one.